Now, Reform UK have an exciting bit of news today. And this is coming from my good friends at Sly News. And Sly News say that Reform UK polls to within 2 points of the Tories in the latest YouGov poll. The exclusive survey for Sky News puts Labour on 40%, the Tories on 19%, and Reform on 17%. So very much chipping away at the Tory vote there, eating into it. And I imagine actually as well, taking away from some Labour votes as well. There will be, remember, lots of left-wing patriots who really like Nigel Farage, really agree with what he's done. But I was thinking about why this could be, right? And I saw these, and again, this is from Sly News, but I promise I'm not on the turn. I really don't like much of what Sky News are posting, but they have posted good stuff like this. And they posted this graphic, and I think it's a really important explainer on where we're at and how much we have been betrayed on immigration. So if you see here, from 2000, net migration starts to just veer off like you wouldn't believe. And that's, of course, under Tony Blair. And then under the Conservatives from 2020 onwards, once we'd actually taken back control, we have Brexit powers. We're able to actually dictate who can and cannot come into our country. The Tories decide actually what we really want to do, and what the British people voted for in 2016 was for us to fling our borders open so far that actually it looks a bit like that OnlyFans account that we were talking about earlier. And they fling it open, and look, it goes up here. You've got over 1% of the entire population coming in as net migration. And what we've imported over the past few years is half the size of the whole of Scotland coming here. That's not sustainable. I don't care if you're the biggest net migration nut on the planet. That ain't sustainable. You're complaining about the fact that the NHS doesn't work? Well, let's look at these stats. You're complaining that there aren't enough houses? Well, let's look at these stats. You're complaining there's not enough places for your kids at school? Well, let's look at these stats. You're complaining that services like your bin collections aren't happening as often? Well, let's look at these stats. All are implicated in this. And Farage actually was the first one to actually say this. He said this in 2015. He raised the alarm and he was laughed at. But I think this explains why Reform are doing so well. Let's just have a little watch and a reminder of what he said in 2015.
We are talking about a market, folks. I know none of you have ever worked in business, but we're talking about a market. And markets are about demand and supply. And I just wonder, I'm curious, could I get any recognition from any of you that the demand side of this equation is that a rapidly rising population due to open-door immigration, started by Ed Miliband's Labour Party in the late 1990s, has directly contributed towards the housing crisis. Is there any flicker of recognition from any of you? Please, one of you, have a go, please.
We have a housing shortage across this country. But you know what, Nigel Farage? It's not caused by immigrants. In your world, every problem is caused by immigrants. We need to build more houses. We have a situation where certainly the Tory plans are, Ed's may be slightly different, but the Tory plans are to spend a fraction building new houses of what is spent every year on housing benefit. It's the shortage of houses that drives up rent. We need to build more houses, substantially more houses.
And migrants need to live somewhere.
For the people who can't buy their own home and need to rent. Now, you know, Nigel, you're obviously on a setting out to win friends and influence people tonight, but if we can get away, in this debate from the idea that every problem...
Can I just alert you all to the fact you don't know the questions that are coming. I do, and there is a question coming on immigration. So let's perhaps not go in too much depth on that for the moment.
just astonishing. I mean, if you cannot
You
accept,
are, yes.
if you cannot accept, if you are not worldly enough to accept there is a demand-supply side to this equation, then
I do accept
I'm very
that.
sorry.
I want to come back.
I'm very, very sorry.
I accept
Natalie,
demand and supply. I simply don't accept that all of the demand bit of it is down to immigrants.
Natalie, all right, let's leave.
When the population goes up, Nicola,
you two.
when the population goes up, there is more demand for houses.
Right.
It's not difficult.
Yeah, so that's just one of the issues there that explains, this going up like this. He predicted it. He said it in 2015. That's nearly 10 years ago. Bloody hell, that makes me feel old. And he rang the alarm, and he was laughed at by that BBC audience there, by the politicians on that panel. And he was right. And Alex, I wonder if this is explaining why people are saying, I've had enough of the two main parties. They are two cheeks of the same behind. They have allowed this to happen. This country is going down the shitter, and I need to do something about it. So I'm going to look at alternatives like reform.
Well, it's pretty obvious. The British public have said this time and time again. We don't want any more immigration, and we're willing for our economy to take a hit as a result of it. I mean, we voted to get to lower migration in multiple elections, electing the Tories, who promised us tens of thousands a year, not almost millions. And then we had the referendum for Brexit, which was a massive sign as well that we wanted to end free movement. And now Reform are about to outpoll the Tories. The interesting thing about that poll, Darren, is that half of it was done before Nigel Farage became leader. So that poll, I can guarantee you, would be even bigger today when there's a fresh poll being done. I can guarantee you the Tories will be behind Reform, because they are the only party, now that we've seen what the Tories are actually capable of under Boris and under everyone else who's let us down, and they have no intention of fixing migration. They've gone, right, well, there's only one alternative here, and that's Reform. And this is why Nigel Farage needed to U-turn on that decision, because without the Tories, he really needed to, because without him, this would be over for another decade. And by that point, it's going to be too late. But now there's a chance that Reform can really finish off the Tory party and make that party and unite the right, essentially, is what I want to see.
And going back to what you said earlier, right, he can highlight, he can also reach out to the TikTok generation, bringing in these young people and influencing them through new ideas and exposing them to ideas they've never heard before, and actually explaining to them how immigration hurts them directly in the pocket, right? There is no evidence actually that a depression on wages is beneficial to working class kids in parts of this country.
Yeah, simple stuff really, isn't it? As Nigel said, if you can't put the equation together, more immigrants equals more demand, then he can't help you. And this is very simple stuff. Kids can do this on
supply and demand. Supply and demand.
It's the economy, stupid, and we've also figured out that more immigration doesn't lead to higher GDP. It's all been exposed. It's just taken bold people to come out and say it that aren't afraid of being called a racist.
Eunice, why do you think Farage is doing so well and about to beat the Tories? And do you predict that he will actually end up getting a higher vote share?
I'm a big fan of Nigel Farage. I supported him during the Brexit, and I always knew that Brexit is going to win. I feel like the silent majority actually agrees with him, even though they don't come out and say it. I actually read this study that said that actually college and high school boys especially, they lean a lot more conservative now, the Gen Z, compared to Gen X and millennials. So you would have, and I think this is a result of just 20, 30 years of just neoliberal brainwashing and wokeism, and they're just having a natural fight back by the younger generation. But back to the point of GDP. On paper, you can say that GDP does increase when you have immigrants, but GDP per capita decreases. And if you want to be a wealthy nation, you need to have a high GDP per capita. I'll give you an example. So China and India are second and third biggest GDPs in the world, respectively. However, the buying power of their citizens is less than half of a British citizen. However, when you look at countries such as Norway and Sweden, their GDP is like 1/10 of the United Kingdom, but their GDP per capita is like twice the size. So you want to be living in societies where people have a lot of money to spend and they have a lot of buying power. So the GDP per capita is actually the analysis you need to look at, that your country is doing well, not your entire GDP,
Yeah. Well, I mean, even the Bank of England, said that there was no evidence that immigration was having an uptick on everybody's incomes and the GDP and all the rest of it. There is just no evidence that it is doing that. Now,
can I just say one more thing on this, Darren? It's just really briefly. Most people don't mind immigrants coming to this country. 95%, I'd say 95% of people I speak to do not mind people from foreign nations coming here, but they want them to culturally integrate. They want them to adhere to British values. They want them to work and be treated fairly and the same as all of us. None of this, I'm a different skin color to you, so I deserve to have privilege. That is not what Britain is. So if this whole argument wouldn't even exist if there weren't these crazy troglodyte level socialists saying that these people that we bring here not only should be entitled to benefits immediately, but should also get a leg up in work, should get a leg up on the housing ladder, and ghettoize parts of the country. That is the problem here. It's not immigrants, it's the way that they have been integrated to the country. And if we change that, then I can guarantee you most British people wouldn't bat an eyelid.
Yeah. Now, the Independent had a conversation with someone from YouGov, the pollster. And by the way, I absolutely cannot stand the Independent changing their logo to include that new flag thing. I mean, they're supposed to be an independent paper, right? But clearly not if you're dancing with the devil there and having a dalliance with that kind of ideology. But anyway, Nigel Farage could win Reform UK as many as 4 seats at general election, says YouGov. Exclusive, Nigel Farage's decision to stand could see Reform compete for seats in several constituencies, says the pollster, and it has some of these seats set out here. So there's Hereford, there's parts of Wales, there's Somerset, there's Bridgewater, Dorset, the Isle of Wight, even Exmouth.
Oh, Wight, bloody
Spelthorne. There's Bognor Regis. There's Folkestone. There is Spelthorne. There's Hertfordshire, Basildon, which I believe is Ticey standing in Basildon. I can't remember now. Clacton, where of course
he is, isn't he?
Okay. Clacton, where Farage is standing. West Suffolk, which is, I believe, Matt Hancock, his constituency. Boston and Skegness, and Great Yarmouth. What's that? Ashfield. Oh, Ashfield. That's Lee Anderson, of course, his constituency, and Amber Valley. Now, the ones in the darker yellow are the ones that they're predicted to do very well in. So Boston being one, Clacton doing very well as well. I'd love to see Nigel in Parliament. I really, really would. I'm probably not supposed to say that, so I hope no one from my employer is watching, but I really would love to see him because I think he would be a menace to both Labour and the Conservatives, and I mean that as an endearing term of love. I think he would hold their feet to the fire, and he'd be a brilliant parliamentarian actually in that chamber. Alex?
Well, I was just going to really briefly say what this actually sets up, and I think look, there's going to be a lot of people in the comments who disagree with me about this because I do think Nigel's going to win this seat. I think it would be a shocker if he didn't actually at this point in time, considering how many votes he's taking off both Labour and the Tories in that constituency. But what I think this actually sets up is a way for Nigel, as party leader for Reform and in the House of Commons, to start moving the Conservative Party back to where it belongs, in Conservative territory. Now, I would be very surprised if the Tories don't lean on Nigel. He will be the most senior right-wing politician left in the opposition benches when the Tory party gets wiped down to 120 seats or less. He will be de facto leader of the right wing in the House of Commons. It sets the path for Nigel to go back into the Conservative Party, especially while they're going to be in this tumultuous period, as a sitting MP and then depart Reform and go to the Tories. If that isn't successful, then the Tories will be gone forever. But I think that would be the plan if I was Nigel Farage.
So you think he will cannibalise the Conservatives from within Parliament?
Yes. Yeah, they already love him as it is. Look at all the people that might be keeping their seats. People like Priti Patel, Suella Braverman's doing pretty well in her seat. Those sorts of people will go, let's bring Nigel in. Let's get him in the Conservative Party. And that will change. That will be what wins them back their support in 5 years' time.
Yeah, Eunice, do you agree with that?
Yes, and I think, well, most likely Labour is going to unfortunately win the next general election.
Oh,
However,
yeah.
if Reform does well, and can they are they available on all the ballots? Like, or they start on certain parts,
Yeah,
they're not.
as far as we're
They are
Yeah,
aware.
available. So
as
yeah,
far as I'm aware, but the deadline is
yeah,
Friday, so yeah.
yeah. Let's hope they are, because I'm definitely voting Reform myself. And as I said this before, I feel like Nigel Farage is going to take a lot of votes away even from Labour, because, as I said, he's the
Yeah.
last charismatic leader that can invigorate a new generation. And he
Mm.
might take a lot of votes from Labour, he might take a lot of votes from Conservatives. And in an ideal world, neither party is going to get the majority. And the only way the right can survive this election is that if Reform and the Conservatives can build a coalition together against Labour. It's unlikely. And Conservatives, Rishi Sunak yesterday say, "Oh, if you don't vote for us, it's a vote wasted." I don't agree, because I
I'm
don't think the
sick of hearing that.
Conservatives. Yeah, and the Conservatives are not even right wing anymore. They're centre, and they even
Yeah.
pander to the left a little bit more. The only true right wing, or at least centre right wing party left in this country is the Reform Party. And I'm a big fan of Nigel Farage, as I said. I would like to help him, actually. I spoke to Richard Tice the other day on the phone, and I was actually going to stand as an MP for West Ham. However, on
Wow.
Thursday, they said that it's not enough time for the vetting period. So I put my papers forward on Thursday, and I spoke to this gentleman called Roger Gravett, I think, by Friday, and he said there's not enough time because the weekend coming and the vetting is,
Mm.
you're supposed to
Yeah,
submit the papers by Tuesday. So
That's a shame.
yeah.
unfortunately,
Yeah.
I missed that opportunity by a day or two, but it doesn't matter. But I've already been in contact with Reform, and as you said, Nigel Farage is really good speaker and is great on social
Oh,
media.
yeah. He's
So if I can like
phenomenal.
meet up with him and maybe they'll do a couple of videos, me and him, I feel like it will really help his campaign. So, I mean,
Okay.
if
Yeah.
You
Nigel's
know what? I
watching
think
this, I would really like to help
Yeah.
him.
Yeah. All right, Alex.
what well, I think what's really important is
Yeah.
that Reform can make enough leeway into the Tory
Yes.
vote that the Tories can't ignore them. Because my
Yeah.
concern is that within 4 years' time, the Tories will have to start making a comeback, and that's going to be the telling point for them. Because if they lower their vote share again, but Reform can't break through, there's going to have to be something give. Now, this is the critical point, which is why I think it's so important that Nigel gets elected more than any other MP. I'd love to see Richard in there. I'd love to see Lee Anderson in there as well, and I'd love to see others. But I think it's critical that Nigel gets elected, because
Mm.
he is going to be he's going to be kingmaker for the Tory party if they get him in. I'm not saying he's ever going to be prime minister, because I think that's highly unlikely. But Nigel Farage in the Conservative Party in a high office position, in a shadow cabinet position, would certainly turn the fortunes of a Conservative Party. That's for sure.
Have you got what it takes to be a reasoned presenter? Well, send us a short clip of yourself to join@reasoned.uk, and we might be seeing you on this very channel very soon indeed.